He walked in like he owned the place and burned, grinning, dragging sand into the foyer like we were still at some Florida beach resort, instead of back in the hills of San Francisco. His mother, Margaret, followed behind in a giant sun hat and oversized sunglasses. Mind you, already talking over me before I could get a word out. "Oh," she sneered, peeking at me from behind her ridiculous shades. "You're still here? Thought you'd have cleared out by now. Kevin's got someone coming over. Would be awkward if you're still around." Someone. She meant Emily, the piano teacher, the one who sends heart emojis in papal notes and pretends not to know I exist when she calls the house. I didn't flinch. 30 minutes, I said, standing. "I'll be gone. Don't worry." That threw her. You could see the confusion flicker even through the lenses. She looked at Kevin for clarification, but he was busy fixing his collar in the hallway mirror like a prom date. Not even subtle about it. He hadn't looked that giddy since Sean got his first varsity letter. They both thought I'd slink away quietly, that I'd pack a bag, leave a weepy note, maybe throw in a casserole for good measure. Wrong decade, wrong woman. I sat back down, crossed my legs, and watched the clock. 20 minutes. Kevin hummed as he picked out a bottle of Napa Valley sparkling wine. Probably thought it'd be charming. A toast to new beginnings, or fresh affairs. Then came the doorbell. Margaret's smile vanished first. Kevin froze, halfway to the fridge. The car outside was no Uber. It was Ryan Clark's bent life kind of car you only see in gated neighborhoods or investment portfolios. Kevin knew the car, knew the driver, knew what it meant when Ryan stepped out in a tailored navy suit and walked straight to the door, with a briefcase and a purpose. "What the hell is this?" Kevin said. "Negotiations," I replied. See, while they were off tanning and toasting their lack of shame, I'd been talking to lawyers, digging up everything. The mishandled assets, the transferred funds to Emily's account, the forged signature on the second mortgage, the Shell LLC that somehow hired Sean for a non-existent summer job. Ryan's firm handled high-stakes family asset disputes. And Ryan? He owed me a favor from a decade ago, back when I coached him through his mother's stroke and helped him not lose his damn mind. Now he was here for me. Margaret sputtered. You're bluffing." I looked at her, dead on. "This house isn't yours. It's marital property, and per the California family code, your vacation doesn't change that." I stood, calm. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. That would have been giving them too much. Kevin opened his mouth to protest, but I cut in. Flat. "You invited her here thinking you were replacing me. You didn't realize I already replaced you." And just like that, I walked toward the door to let Ryan in. Margaret and Kevin, they stood there like furniture, waiting to be repossessed. Margaret stood at the kitchen island, slicing strawberries like they'd personally wronged her. The kind of angry chopping that wasn't about the fruit. I stood across from her, folding Sean's laundry, waiting for the inevitable dig. "You know, Sarah," she said, tone syrupy and false. "It's just interesting how some women chase after men with money and then act shocked when the men lose interest." There it was. I didn't look up. "You mean like Emily?" Her jaw twitched, just slightly. She hated when I didn't flinch. "I meant women who work in places where glitter passes for class," she said, wiping her knife a little too hard. "But I suppose names don't matter. Kevin always said you were different. Guess we were both wrong." I smiled thinly. "Different how, exactly?" She set the knife down. "You knew how to play the game. The nails, the voice, the tragic backstory. Orphaned in high school, wasn't it? Very compelling. That wasn't a jab. That was a bullet laced in pearls." "Yes," I said, folding the last shirt. Hard to compete with someone who built her life off other people's pain. I wasn't going to rise. I'd spent too many years playing Margaret's emotional chess. But this time, she was the one cornered. She just didn't know it yet. She tried again. "Look, we both know Kevin can be generous, but he values substance. Not just surface. Substance." The man who thought empathy was a weakness and paid more attention to his Tesla's mileage than our son's college prep? That Kevin. I dropped the towel and looked straight at her. Funny, when we met, he praised my clear eyes and flawless skin. Never once asked about my books or the 3 jobs I juggled to finish community college. You think I used glitter? He picked me like a car off the lot. She hesitated. You think I worked hard to get a man? I continued. I worked hard to pay off a $72. Zero debt from the hospital that didn't even try to resuscitate my parents. I worked hard because no one else would keep me afloat. Not for love, for survival. Margaret stared, hands still. No sarcasm left. And Kevin, I added, hasn't asked about my goals in years. But Emily, she's light. She doesn't ask for anything. She lets him pretend he's noble. I'm the mirror. That's the real problem. Just then, Kevin strolled in, keys in hand, not even noticing the tension. We'll be out late, he said, not looking at either of us. I know, I said. It's your turn to pay. Margaret blinked. For what? She asked. For your son's debts. Financial, emotional, and the ones you helped him make. Kevin paused at the door. And if you don't, I said, locking eyes with her. I go public. Emails, transactions, the second mortgage. Sean already knows more than he should. Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it. The fruit sat bleeding on the cutting board. That silence, that was mine. I'd earned it. Margaret always liked to remind me that this house was the one on the hill with the double garage, and the view of the bay was her son's legacy. Her phrasing, not mine. As if Kevin had built it brick by brick, instead of marrying into it after I'd already paid off the second mortgage. As if my name on the deed was an administrative error. You know, she said one evening, arms folded as I emptied the dishwasher, when Kevin decided to settle down with you, we were surprised. We thought he'd pick someone more established. She said established like it had a silent asterisk. No debt, no past, no history of working nights to keep a roof over her head. Established, I repeated, slotting in the last plate. You mean someone whose parents left them a trust instead of a mortgage? She blinked, not expecting a direct hit that early in the evening. I just mean, she sniffed, we all want what's best for Kevin. I smiled without showing teeth. So did I. Years ago, when I was 20, I'd signed the paperwork for this home under my uncle's name. Because legally I wasn't old enough. It was my parents' dream to finally own something, however modest. Before cancer and a drunk driver ended that chapter in one blow. I worked nights while pretending to be a normal college student by day. Kevin never knew what to do with that information. He liked repeating it like a trivia fact. My wife used to work nights. Can you believe that? Always with a little laugh. I had believed him, once. Believed that he respected me for it. That he saw the grind and the grit as admirable. He told me I was strong. He told me he didn't care about my debt. He told me he admired how I protected what my parents left behind. He told me a lot of things. What he didn't tell me was that he'd later hide funds. That he'd lie about bonuses. That he'd flirt with Emily Ross at Sean's music recital and say it was just creative collaboration. Or that he'd stop seeing me as a partner and start seeing me as background noise. Margaret sipped her tea like a judge at a sentencing. You should be careful about clinging too hard to something that was never really yours, she said. I stared at her, steady. That's rich coming from someone who didn't pay for it, build it, or clean it. Kevin walked in then, briefcase in one hand. The scent of Emily's perfume still hanging on his shirt. I didn't mention it. He kissed Margaret on the cheek. Hey, Mom. I watched him like a stranger. Watched the woman who raised him beam at the son who was already halfway out of our marriage. Margaret smiled sweetly. We were just talking about the house. I bet you were, I said, picking up my phone. Because what she didn't know that neither of them knew was that I'd quietly updated the title months ago. After the trust fund Kevin raided hit my radar. After the first red flag from Sean's college account. After I decided I wasn't going to be the one leaving. This house, it was mine. Bought with grief, paid with dignity. Let them try and take it. Margaret let herself in again. No knock, no warning. Just the sound of her orthopedic heels clicking across the tile. Like she was walking into her own kingdom. She barely glanced at me as she dropped her purse on the dining table I'd just wiped down. The entryway smells like takeout again, she said, nose wrinkled. I hope Kevin isn't living on meatloaf and boxed mac and cheese. I didn't reply. I was too focused on staying calm, breathing past the irritation that had become second nature. At 34 weeks pregnant, with swollen ankles and a mortgage in both our names, I didn't have the energy to explain to her that I cooked every night except last night, when I'd worked late submitting HR reports so Kevin wouldn't miss his tea time with a client. She scanned the living room. I had cleaned it that morning, wiped surfaces, vacuumed, even fluffed the damn couch cushions. She still found something. A speck of lint, maybe a misplaced coaster. You know, she said, pregnancy isn't an illness. My generation kept spotless homes and still had time to iron our husbands' shirts. I looked up from the laundry basket. You think Kevin owns a single shirt that's not dry cleaned? She paused, briefly, then gave me that tight, smug smile she always wore before a dig. You should still try. Your generation has lost pride in appearance. Look at that hair. And those nails? Really, Sarah, red polish? At your age and pregnant, it's just tacky. We'd reached the personal attack portion of her visit. My OB didn't flag my nail color as a risk factor, I said, folding Sean's hoodie. But maybe you should check with Webmd. Her eyes narrowed. It's not about health. It's about image. Kevin works in tech. His wife shouldn't look like she's still bartending. There it was. That word, always coded, bartending, night work, those women. Her favorite insults came gift-wrapped in middle-class decency. You think the color of my nails will crash his stock options? I asked. She huffed. I think you've forgotten your place. I smiled. I think you've mistaken this house for yours. That stopped her for a beat. I didn't give her time to recover. You don't live here, Margaret. You don't run this house. You don't raise this baby. And unless you're ready to start paying a share of the utilities, I suggest you keep your comments as short as your visits. She opened her mouth, then shut it. She hadn't expected pushback. She never does. Kevin, when he's hair stays conveniently silent. He calls it staying out of it. I call it cowardice. I'll dye the hair, I added, casually. Not because you said to, but because I've decided I'd like a change. That's what grown women do. We decide. I watched her grab her purse with jerky movements, flustered. And for once, she didn't get the last word. The hallway fell quiet again. I sat down, rubbed my belly, and smiled at the thought. This baby was going to grow up watching a woman who didn't bend. Kevin didn't see the problem. Of course he didn't. He came home late, belly full from some overpriced sushi dinner billed as client relations, dropped his shoes wherever they landed, and barely noticed that our electricity bill had doubled since his mother moved in. You're exaggerating, he said, waving it off. It's not like she eats that much. And the heater thing? She just gets cold easily. She leaves the shower running for 20 minutes before even stepping in. And she uses the induction stove like it's a hot plate at a hibachi grill. He smirked. So what? She likes to cook. She made instant oatmeal and boiled eggs for herself. After asking me why I don't make you steak more often, that landed somewhere between indifference and amusement for Kevin. He leaned back, grabbed a beer, and muttered, "You've always been sensitive about money. It's the way you grew up, right? Poor girl instincts." He never missed a chance to remind me I didn't come from a line of dentists and software engineers. You call it being cheap, I said. I call it being the only adult in this house who pays the property tax. Technically, it's your house, he shrugged. You were already living here. I didn't ask you to cover everything. No, I said flatly. You just never offered. The Hilltop house wasn't cheap to maintain. I paid the bills. I stocked the fridge. I covered Sean's daycare, the dues, even the Uber receipts Margaret never acknowledged. She couldn't handle the slope, she said. Her knees. So I paid for every round-trip ride she took between here and her retirement yoga class. Kevin called it family duty. I called it freeloading with entitlement. But what finally broke me wasn't the bills or even her passive-aggressive digs about how I looked tired lately. It was the crib. The one I spent two weekends assembling while Kevin was in Tahoe on a work retreat. One morning, I found Margaret rearranging the nursery furniture without asking. I just thought this corner had better energy, she said, pushing the crib with her elbow like it was hers to move. I didn't ask for your help. Well, I told the neighbors I'd be helping more with the baby. People respect hands-on grandmothers. You mean the neighbors I've never met because you introduced yourself before I could? She smiled like I'd just proven her point. Later, when I told Kevin, he laughed. Why are you so territorial? It's not like she's hurting anyone. She told me to take Sean outside at 3 a.m. so she could sleep. She's just old-fashioned, he said. She means well. No, she means control. But by then, it was too late. Margaret had moved in without asking, and Kevin had let her. One day she was just staying over, and the next, her framed photo of Kevin as a child was on the nightstand of the room. That used to be the guest office, her new room. And somehow, I was the guest, in my own home, paying for the privilege. Margaret moved in without warning. No discussion, no heads up, just a text from Kevin that read, "Mom's bringing her things over today. Be nice, she's here to help." Help? Right. Help with what, exactly? Passive-aggressive commentary? Rearranging my spice rack behind my back? Explaining to me that store-bought baby food is lazy mothering? She brought nothing but boxes of expired vitamins, a suitcase full of turtlenecks, and unsolicited opinions. And suddenly, I was feeding and housing two adults, one of whom hadn't paid a dime toward the bills since moving in, and the other who thought Wi-Fi was a utility you just manifest. When Sean finally got into daycare, I felt the first breath of freedom I'd had in months. I could go back to work. Paychecks, structure, sanity. Kevin gave a vague thumbs up. Margaret, however, acted like I'd announced I was abandoning Sean on a freeway median. "You're really going to dump your baby off with strangers?" she said, cradling a coffee mug I bought and she now claimed as hers. "He needs his mother, not some hourly wage babysitter. He also needs heat, food, and a roof," I said, pulling on my coat, "which requires income." Her mouth twisted. "Money doesn't raise a child. Love does." "Then you're overdue on rent, Margaret." The day she picked Sean up without telling me was the tipping point. She didn't ask. She just showed up at the daycare, told the staff she was his grandmother, and took him. By the time I found out, she was calling me from the house, flustered because Sean was fussy and wouldn't calm down. I left a board meeting in front of clients to come home and fix a mess she created. After that, I notified the daycare. No pickups except me. Margaret lost it. Called me a controlling, heartless daughter-in-law. Said I was treating her like a criminal. Said she should call a lawyer. Kevin, for once, didn't take her side. He said, "Just drop it, Mom. You overstepped." I could have hugged him if I hadn't been waiting for the catch. And it came. Around the time Sean turned 5, Kevin started volunteering more at the daycare's parent functions. He claimed he was being helpful, said he'd cover the parent-teacher mixer, then the seasonal planning committee, then the casual dad meetups. But then came the late nights, then the early mornings. "Bobby's dad drinks too much," he said. "I end up helping him get home. Every time. I'm the only one with enough time to hang back and make sure the guys are safe." No other dad ever mentioned these heroic rescues. No other wife ever texted to say, "Thank your husband for looking after mine." So I told him, maybe I'll come to the next one. It's been a while. And Kevin froze. You'd that'd be weird. You don't usually." "Exactly," I said. "Time to change things up. Because the last time I didn't show up, I got a surprise roommate. This time, I want to see who else Kevin's letting in without asking." Kevin always knew how to weaponize praise, subtle, surgical. He'd beam about how involved he was in Sean's life, as if attending 3 piano lessons a week erased every other absence. English, piano, swimming. He'd say proudly, "We've got Sean set up to thrive." Meanwhile, I paid for everything: monthly fees, materials, transportation costs. Kevin's version of contribution was showing up in joggers, sipping overpriced coffee, chatting up the instructors like a bored investor who just remembered he owns stock in this child. Margaret ate it up. "Kevin is such a hands-on dad," she said one afternoon, watching him walk out the door with Sean's music binder tucked under his arm. "You're lucky. Most women would kill for that kind of support." "Support usually implies lifting something," I replied. She scoffed. "At least he's not glued to his desk 24/7 like some people." "When's the last time you took Sean to anything?" "I paid for everything you just mentioned." "Money doesn't raise a child." "No," I said, "but it pays the person who does." Margaret didn't appreciate the math lesson. But what really didn't add up was Kevin's newfound enthusiasm for Sean's extracurriculars. He'd come home later than ever, claiming parent meetups ran long. Bobby's dad drinks too much again, he'd say, dropping his keys by the door. Had to stay until he sobered up. Every week. I tried to believe it, until I offered to join the next parent mixer. That's when Kevin flinched. You just sit there and make people uncomfortable. You're intense. Better intense than invisible. After that, I started picking Sean up myself when Kevin had conflicts. The piano teacher, a bright, polite woman just out of grad school always seemed slightly on edge when I arrived. She smiled too wide, used my full name too much. And Sean, he was sweet, as always, earnest, gentle. One day, after practice, he said, "Mom, I'll play something for you." He placed his small fingers on the keys and played a piece I didn't know, but that stopped me cold. Simple, delicate, precise. He looked proud, hoping for my smile. I gave it to him. Gave it with everything I had. Then Margaret barged in from the kitchen. "Can he keep it down? I can't hear the TV," she barked. The moment shattered. Sean's hands froze over the keys. I stood up. "Margaret," I said calmly, "this house has enough space. You can watch your shows in the room you claimed without asking. But this is my son's space. And mine. You don't get to ruin it just because you're bored." She opened her mouth, but the tone had changed. For once, she sensed she'd crossed a line that wouldn't be repainted. Sean went back to playing, quiet but confident. And for a moment, I let myself believe that even in a house full of noise, a mother's silence when earned can still carry weight. Kevin was in the living room when I got home, which was already unusual. It was past 7, and for once he wasn't stuck at dinner with the team or mysteriously Mia. He was on the phone, half reclined on the couch, laughing too loud at something clearly not funny. "No, I mean, the guy's competential," he said, voice rising like he was performing. "But have you seen him? He's got that weird startup guru vibe. Soft, totally beatable." There was a pause, then a laugh. Then, yeah, give it a year. I'll be running the place." He didn't see me standing there. Or if he did, he didn't care. I stood long enough to hear the name Ryan Clark, new CEO, former classmate of mine. Sharp, disciplined, the type of person who didn't waste time pretending to be someone he wasn't, which might explain why Kevin resented him. He hung up and turned toward the kitchen, finally noticing me. "Didn't expect you back so early." "I live here," I said. "Remember?" He shrugged. "Ryan's giving some lecture at Sean's school next week. Thought I might go show my face. Build presence." Kevin didn't even show up to parent-teacher conferences. But now he wanted to network at a high school event. "That's funny," I said, dropping my bag. "Sean mentioned wanting to go. Thought it'd be good for him." Kevin was already checking his phone. "He's a kid. What's he gonna get out of it?" "He's a kid who's paying attention," I said. "More than I can say for his father." Kevin laughed under his breath. "You're still on that?" "I pay attention." "No, you pay nothing. Not for his school, not for his lessons, not for the house you sleep in." "Oh, come on," he snapped. "You act like I'm freeloading. I don't ask you for money." "You don't have to," I said. "You just benefit from everything I cover. You think because I don't chase you for it, it's free." He rolled his eyes. "I've got networking expenses, business development, and anyway, you're better at managing the house. You mean I don't have the luxury of pretending not to notice bills?" He looked away. I struck a nerve. "Good. And Sean," I added, "the one you drag from hobby to make yourself look engaged. He practices piano after school because your mother complains it's too noisy here. 16, and he still tiptoes around his own home." Kevin scoffed. "He likes piano. He likes peace, Kevin. Something no one in this house seems willing to give him." Just then, Margaret shuffled in, robe and slippers, clutching a bowl of popcorn like she owned the place. "Is this really the time to fight? The TV's too loud already." I stared at her, then looked at Kevin, then back to my bag. "I'll take Sean to that lecture," I said. "Ryan actually knows what leadership looks like. Might be a useful contrast." Neither of them said anything. They rarely did once things got real. I went to find Sean. Somewhere in this house, a kid was still quietly practicing, still hoping someone would show up for the right reasons. Kevin didn't realize I was standing just down the hallway. He was too wrapped up in the sound of his own voice, half gloating, half scheming, talking to someone on speaker about taking down his new CEO. Honey trap, maybe? Not serious. Just saying, the guy's green. He won't last. Let him play boss for now. I'll replace him soon enough, he said, laughing low. Then, with a softer tone, once I'm in charge, I'll get you something better. You deserve it. Love you. The words didn't hit like a slap, they hit like a file you'd forgotten you were building a case with. I'd suspected things. I'd ignored the signs. Not out of love, not anymore, but for Sean, for the house, for the illusion that stability still lived here. But hearing him whisper love you to someone who wasn't mezzo-casual, so assured it felt surgical, deliberate. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I turned, stepped silently back toward the hallway, pulled one breath deep enough to steady my spine, and made my way to Sean's room. I needed time. I needed calm. I needed a plan. But as I reached for Sean's door, I saw him walking toward me from the other end of the hallway, coming from the living room. He'd heard. His face wasn't shocked, it was resigned, like he'd been piecing the puzzle together himself. At 16, you know when something stinks. He pointed toward his room, eyes steady, and said quietly, "Come in." Inside, I sat at his desk. He sat on the edge of his bed, casual but composed. "Tough break," he said, a little smirk tugging at his mouth. "Dad's not exactly subtle." I blinked. "You heard. Enough." Pretty sure he was talking to receptionist number 3, the one with the red Lexus. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, not from shame, but from the weight of confirmation and the knowledge that my son had been quietly watching us unravel long before I admitted anything aloud. "I didn't want you to know," I said. Sean shrugged. "I figured it out a while ago. Just didn't want to make it harder." That hit harder than Kevin's betrayal. My son, carrying emotional weight like a grown man while the actual grown man in our house played corporate kingmaker and bedtime Casanova. "What do you want to do?" I asked finally. He looked me in the eye. "Whatever keeps you sane, Mom. This house, it's yours, not his. You shouldn't be the one to leave." The clarity in his voice, it reminded me of my father, of the people who taught me to hold the line, even when the world tried to redraw it. And just like that, my decision was made. I wasn't going anywhere. Kevin could chase titles, lie through his teeth, promise the world to his assistant of the month, but this house, me parents' house, was not collateral for his midlife delusions. Let him try to climb. I'll be right here, stable, immovable, with the only ally that matters sitting calmly on the edge of his bed, already smarter than the man who thought he could outmaneuver us both. Sean said it so calmly I almost missed the explosion inside the words. "She's pretty, probably the prettiest woman at Dad's company, but you're more beautiful, Mom." He smiled like it was just another Tuesday. I froze. "Sean, what are you talking about?" "The receptionist. They've been seeing each other for a while now. I saw them near the tutoring center, holding hands. Once, I think I saw them kiss in the car." The room shifted. My breath slowed like my body needed time to process betrayal coming from my own child's mouth. Sean wasn't angry. He wasn't dramatic. He was just tired, like he'd known long before I did. "And there's someone else," he added. "My piano teacher." That nearly knocked the air out of me. "Emily?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sean nodded. "I think she's the one he actually likes. The receptionist's just for fun." I had to sit. Everything clicked. Had forced encouragement about piano, the sudden interest in Sean's progress, the overzealous praise for a teacher Kevin barely knew. Except now, it all made sense. He wasn't supporting Sean's passion. He was currying favor with his mistress. "Dad likes to be with number ones," Sean said, staring ahead. "The receptionist is the prettiest at the company. Emily won the piano competition. This house, he told me once, it's the biggest on the hill. And Yao said you used to be number one at your job." I didn't cry. I just sat there, wondering how much more my son had been carrying, how many secrets he'd chosen to guard, not for Kevin, but for me. And now, I asked. Sean looked at me. "Now it's your turn to be number one again." He had a plan, a measured, intelligent, tactical plan that involved tracking Kevin's behavior, securing access to accounts, logging call times, creating a quiet, undeniable chain of evidence. From a 16-year-old, my son, calm, clear-eyed, fierce in his loyalty. Later that week, I started watching Kevin the way I should have years ago. The erratic overnight trips, the sudden client meetings with no calendar trail, the burner number on his second phone. He didn't even bother to hide it anymore. I suppose he thought I was too tired, too distracted, too defeated to notice. Margaret, of course, sensed the shift. "You're overreacting," she snapped when I questioned another 4 a.m. return. "He's a busy man with real responsibilities. If you weren't so difficult, maybe he'd want to be home more." And there it waste oldest play in the Harper family handbook. Turn the blame back on me. Gaslight, deflect, accuse. Never mind her own complicity. Sean had overheard her once, whispering to Kevin in the kitchen, "She doesn't have what it takes to keep you. You deserve someone who makes life easier." Margaret had been covering for him, shielding him, distracting me with daily insults to keep my eyes off his behavior. And I let her. I let both of them turn my house into a stage for their manipulation. But not anymore. I wasn't going anywhere. Kevin's downfall would come, not from rage, not from a scene, but from precision, from strategy, from the quiet strength of a mother and son. Done being ignored. Margaret was already perched on the couch when I walked through the door, flanked by Kevin and one of her neighborhood Elisams. Green, the kind of woman who thinks gossip is charity work and judgment is a civic duty. The energy in the room was rehearsed. I'd walked into a performance, not a conversation. I set down my keys, already sensing the script. "Sarah," finally, Margaret said, with fox warmth, "we need to talk." Kevin gestured to the seat across from them. I sat, calmly, no coat off, no shoes removed. Just like that, I was the defendant in my own living room. Kevin didn't waste time. "I want a divorce." There it was, neatly delivered, preloaded, as if he'd practiced it in the mirror on one of his not-so-late work nights. I didn't blink. Sean had warned me something was brewing. I just expected more subtlety. Not a staged intervention with Margaret playing ringmaster and a neighbor as moral witness. "Why?" I asked, deadpan. Kevin inhaled like he was about to run a corporate briefing. "You're never round. You're cold. You've neglected the home, Sean's education, everything. I've carried this marriage on my back." "Go on," I said. That's when Margaret jumped in, all wounded dignity. "Kevin tried. God, he tried. But yeah, well, you made his life miserable. He's been in emotional distress since the beginning." She paused for effect, hand on chest. "I've endured so much just watching him suffer." "Mrs. Green nodded like a silent jury. Kevin slid a sheet of paper across the coffee table. I glanced at it. A list. Bullet points, typed in his awkward font, as if a Word document could pass for moral authority. Verbally abusive toward mother-in-law, neglectful of household responsibilities, burdened childcare onto Margaret without consent, unreliable meal preparation, frequent financial demands, emotional harm resulting in psychological suffering. At the bottom, seeking damages for emotional distress. It was laughable. If it had come from a stranger, I might have laughed. But instead, I looked Kevin straight in the eye. "You wrote this?" He nodded, arms crossed, confident, smug. I let the silence stretch, let them think I was absorbing the shame. Then I slid the paper back. "No rebuttal?" Margaret asked, almost gleeful. "Oh, I'll respond," I said. "Just not here. My attorney prefers email." Kevin blinked. "Attorney?" I smiled. "You think I've been cleaning floors and managing bills for 15 years without keeping receipts?" Margaret stiffened. "You wouldn't." I would. And I did. Tax filings, bank transfers, loan statements, Sean's school forms, all in my name, all filed. Kevin's jaw worked like he wanted to respond, but didn't know which lie would land. "Mrs. Green stood up suddenly, pretending to check her watch. "Well, I should." "Please do," I said, standing. "This show's over." I walked past them without another word, leaving the list on the table like the joke it was. Let them plan their little ambushes. Let them draft their fake indictments. I knew where the power lived now, and it wasn't in their living room. It was in my spine. Kevin slid the paper across the table like he was delivering a birthday card. "Come to come." Margaret sat beside him, arms folded, chin high, her mouth one smug line waiting to pounce. And the neighbors. Dwyer sat like a prop between them, pretending neutrality while absorbing everything like she was collecting material for her next HOA meeting. "I'm done," Kevin said. "This marriage isn't working. I've tried. You've made that impossible." I didn't flinch. "Is this the part where you blame my job, my cooking, or my refusal to play housemaid for your mother?" Margaret jumped in, teeth bared in a sweet tone. "He's asking for peace, Sarah, and frankly, you owe it to him after what he's put up with. You never appreciated him. You drove him to this." Mrs. Dwyer stayed quiet, of course. That was her reluctant witness, manufactured credibility. Kevin pulled out another sheet. A list this time. Claims scribbled like a child's homework, accusations about neglect, verbal abuse, financial pressure, and of course, emotional harm. The kicker? He wanted alimony. Or more accurately, he wanted the house. Margaret chimed in. "He's being more than fair. He even said the house could count as your compensation. He's not greedy, just thoughtful," Kevin added, "and generous. You can sign the divorce papers now if you'd like. We'll be gone for 2 weeks. Is that time to pack up?" Margaret leaned forward. "Oh, and just a note. I prefer cash for my share of the settlement. A check is fine, but I'd rather not wait." I stared at them, this little play they had produced, rehearsed lines and all. It wasn't even creative. The villainized wife, the victim husband, the dignified mother-in-law. Predictable, if not lazy. "You're right," I said. "Let's divorce." Kevin blinked. "Seriously? You were expecting a fight?" "No, I just..." "Don't worry," I cut in. "I'll sign, and I'll file it. But I'll need time to find a new place. A clean one." Unlike this performance, they both exchanged glances, then smiled. Too easily. "Sure," Kevin said. 2 weeks. That's fair. I'll even let you keep the fantasy," I added. "Tell people I was the problem. Paint yourselves as the noble ones. Hell, throw a party. But just know this whatever reputation you salvage won't cover what's coming." Margaret tilted her head. "Are you threatening us?" "No," I said, standing. "Just reminding you that I wasn't the one with a mistress, and I wasn't the one whispering about payouts like this was a real estate flip." Mrs. Dwyer's eyes finally moved. Slightly. She'd heard enough to question her role in all this. Margaret stood, smug. "Well, thank you for your cooperation. I knew you'd eventually see reason." "Oh, I've seen reason," I said, walking to the door. "Now you get to see what I do with it. Because in 2 weeks, I wasn't the one who'd be gone. They were just too arrogant to see it coming." Kevin and Margaret left the house the next morning as if they were heading off for a peaceful retreat, luggage rolling across the tile, matching smug expressions. He mumbled something about unplugging and needing space, as if abandoning his family to vacation with his mistress was self-care. Emily Ross was with them, of course, the piano teacher, the one Kevin insisted was just passionate about Sean's development. They didn't even bother with discretion anymore. Not when they assumed I was cornered. As soon as the front door shut, I walked into Sean's room. He was already there, headphones on, laptop open. Calm, composite, almost disturbingly so for a 16-year-old who'd spent weeks collecting proof that his father was a liar in multiple time zones. "Got it all," he said, holding up the voice recorder. Calls from his room, before the trip. He told every single one of them not to call while he was off the grid. He hit play. Kevin's voice filled the room. "Don't message me. I'll be with someone. I love you. I'll call you when I can." Repeat. Different names, same script. A sleazy playlist. I didn't smile. I didn't sigh. I just listened. Then I pulled the signed divorce papers from the folder in my bag and added my name. My signature was steady. "You sure about this, Mom?" Sean asked. "Positive. Because this house me parents' house, the last thing they gave me before everything else in my life cracked, was not going to be handed over to a man who treated it like a stage prop in his personal drama." Kevin had the audacity to call my financial requests money-grabbing. He said asking him to contribute to Sean's tuition was emotional manipulation. He said Margaret deserved a settlement for her emotional labyrinth, same woman who spent her days watching cable TV in my kitchen, offering critiques, but never help. They submitted a list of grievances. I countered with mortgage records, receipts, tax filings, and a log of every utility bill paid from my account. Margaret once told me I should be grateful Kevin picked me when I was just a girl with debt and no family. But I didn't marry him because he saved me. I married him because I thought he'd stand beside me. He didn't. He stood over me. And now he'd be standing in court. Sean leaned back. "We can give this to the lawyer, right?" "Yes," I said. "And we will." They thought I'd panic, that I'd cave, that I'd walk out, flustered, ashamed, carrying a suitcase and a broken legacy. Instead, I stayed. I signed. I filed. I secured the house. And I watched my son not a boy anymore help me hold the line with the kind of calm resilience I wish I'd had 10 years ago. Kevin may have walked out thinking he'd won, but he left the battlefield wide open, and I never lost the house. I just reclaimed it. Kevin and Margaret came back like royalty returning from exile, sunburnt, smug, and radiating the kind of entitlement only people without shame can truly pull off. Kevin rolled in with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, grinning at his reflection in the hallway mirror. "Didn't expect to see you still here," he said, barely glancing my way. "We didn't bring souvenirs. Emily's coming over, so if you could make yourself scarce." Emily, the piano teacher, the woman he used to call Sean's mentor with a straight face. Margaret, draped in a loud floral blouse and oversized sunglasses that screamed duty-free impulse buy, followed with a fake tan and even faker smile. Well, she cooed. "Look who's still squatting." I thought the classy thing to do was exit gracefully. I didn't respond. I just looked at the clock. Right on time. "I'll be out in 30 minutes, I said evenly. Margaret raised an eyebrow behind her shades. She didn't get it yet. That was fine. Understanding wasn't a requirement for consequences. Kevin was too busy adjusting his collar in the mirror to register tone. "Make it quick. Emily'll be here soon. We've got plans." "Plans? Right. I'm sure she'd love the surprise." 20 minutes passed. I sat calmly on the couch, sipping coffee while Kevin bounced between the mirror and the front hall. When the doorbell finally rang, his whole body perked up like a Labrador waiting for a treat. "That's her," he said, and practically skipped to the door. It wasn't Emily. It was a courier. Certified delivery. Signature required. Margaret practically leapt off the couch. "Is that it? Is it from her?" Her voice was already rising with greed. "You didn't send cash, did you? I told you I preferred a check." Kevin laughed. Let's see how generous she got. He signed, took the envelope, and opened it with the flair of someone expecting confetti and applause. Instead, silence, then confusion. This is thin," he said, frowning. "Too thin." "Checks don't weigh much," I said casually, not looking up. Margaret practically snatched it from his hands. "Let me see." She didn't open it. Not right away. The moment stretched just long enough for Kevin to start looking nervous. Then she peeled back the flap and froze. Inside wasn't a check. It was a copy of the deed to the house, with a stamped amendment showing sole ownership in my name. Filed, final, legal. Also inside, a notarized letter from my attorney, confirming receipt of their fabricated claims, and a formal response: no alimony, no damages, no merit. Kevin stared. You filed that? While you were tanning with your soulmates?" Margaret's voice cracked. "You're not serious. This was supposed to be your victory lap," I said, standing. "Well, enjoy the view from the top of the hill." The road down steep. Kevin sputtered something about fairness, about betrayal. I picked up my bag, already packed. "You've got 15 minutes. After that, it's trespassing." Then I walked past them, past their stunned silence, their pathetic grip on a plan that never stood a chance. Not in my house. Not anymore. Kevin didn't even look up when he said it. "Don't contact us again." 16 years of marriage, reduced to a sentence colder than the divorce papers. I almost admired his efficiency, if not for the stunning lack of basic decency. Margaret, of course, nodded like it was a verdict she'd proudly written. "Best for everyone," she muttered, still wearing those ridiculous sunglasses indoors, as if the truth was too bright for her to handle. I didn't bother replying. What was left to say? At this point, I didn't feel anything for Kevin. No pain, No regret, just a clean detachment. He thought he was dismissing me. He didn't realize I'd already walked out emotionally months ago. I won't bother, I said quietly. Not for their benefit, but to remind myself I was free. They didn't even register to busy basking in their illusion of victory. Right on cue, the moving truck pulled up. The driver waved. 30 minutes, just as I'd promised. My things what little I had left that wasn't absorbed into that houseware loaded in minutes. Kevin and Margaret leaned out the front door, watching like they were waiting for a final bow. I didn't give them one. I walked straight to the car idling at the curb. Black, sleek, definitely not mine. As I slid into the back seat, I heard Margaret's voice rise behind me. What the hell is that? I didn't look back. The driver, Ryan Clark, CEO, Kevin's boss, and the very man Kevin had spent months undermining with late-night rants and ego-fueled plans. The irony was delicious. Thanks for this, I said as we pulled away. Ryan just smiled. They'll figure it out eventually. We picked up Sean outside his school, where he'd already spotted the car and raised a hand like nothing about this day was out of the ordinary. Inside the short-term apartment I'd rented, our few belongings were already unpacked just enough to start fresh. Ryan left after a quick chat, promising we'd reconnect later to go over legal logistics. He didn't mention Kevin once. Didn't have to. Life in the new place was quiet, functional, within walking distance to my office, Sean's school, and most important light peace of mind. Then, 2 weeks later, the storm hit. Over 100 missed calls from Kevin. My phone lit up like an alarm. Voicemails full of stammered confusion and veiled desperation. Where did you go? Who's helping you? Why did you leave with him? Because while Kevin was off vacationing with Emily, I filed everything, changed everything, left the keys, took the control. I hadn't just exited his life, I'd restructured mine. Margaret didn't call. I imagined her frozen in that hallway, realizing that her favorite punching bag had not only left but upgraded. Let them chase. Let them wonder. I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not my time, not my answers, and certainly not the house. Kevin finally got through after 20 missed calls. I answered out of convenience, not curiosity. Took you long enough, he snapped. What the hell was in that envelope? That wasn't a check. And where's the alimony for Mom? So they hadn't even opened it before dragging it to the bank. They were so certain it was a check, they marched it straight to the teller without a second glance. The clerk must have had a field day watching them unfold legal terms instead of dollar signs. You assumed it was a check, I said flatly. I never said I was paying anything, and I don't owe her a dime. You serious? He barked. You think this is over? Did you read the letter? Hell no. Not interested unless it buys something. That letter does buy something. It's called a lawsuit if you ignore it. That got him. The tone shifted instantly. Wait, what kind of lawsuit? I kept my voice calm. Just read it. Or don't. Your lawyer will explain it to you soon enough. I hung up before he could spiral into another rant. Then I turned my phone off. I already knew what came next: dozens of calls, threats, pleas, guilt trips, none of which changed facts. Everything they needed to know was spelled out in black and white, reviewed and notarized. By the time Sean got home from school, I'd already notified our lawyer. Did he call? Sean asked, dropping his bag. He did, I said. Sean smiled, knowing. It's finally happening. 2 days later, Kevin through counsel requested a meeting. Their one condition, that I come without my attorney. I agreed, reluctantly. Sometimes you have to walk into the theater to shut down the drama. Sean and I arrived at the house together. My house. They were already waiting, Kevin posturing like a CEO in exile, Margaret clutching a folder like it contained the Constitution. The moment I stepped inside, Margaret barked, "You can't just barge in like this. I'll have you arrested for trespassing." I looked around the room. Interesting theory, but I'd love to see a judge laugh at the idea of a homeowner getting arrested in her own home. She went quiet, but Kevin stepped in with forced diplomacy. "We don't want this to get ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. "Now let's get to the point." Margaret chimed in again. "Did you bring the compensation or not? I've suffered enough." I turned to her, eyes level. "You're suffering? Let's be clear. You moved into my house uninvited, belittled me for years, encouraged your son's infidelity, and now want me to pay you for the damage you helped cause?" She opened her mouth. I raised a hand. "No more spin. No more theater. You've weaponized victimhood long enough." Kevin narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" "Simple," I said. "You stay away from me, and I don't sue for defamation, harassment, and attempted fraud. In exchange, I let you leave quietly." They stared, stunned by the simplicity. "And the house?" Kevin asked. "Mine. Legally. Permanently." That was the end of it. They knew it. I watched realization hit like a slow leak in a sinking ship. I stood. "You can shut the door behind us. Just make sure it's not mine next time." Margaret was already barking orders from the kitchen as I stepped into the house I legally owned. Her voice, shrill and commanding, carried through the living room like she still thought she ran the place. On the couch, Kevin sat half awake, his hair a mess and his expression blank like a man waking from a hangover. Only the hangover was his life unraveling. We had scheduled the meeting in advance, a formal conversation about next steps, but clearly being prepared was too much to ask. Sean and I sat across from them, calm, composed. I let the silence linger long enough for discomfort to settle before speaking. "So, Kevin, did you read the letter from my attorney?" He rubbed his face and shook his head. "Didn't have time." Margaret scoffed. "What letter?" "All I know is I still haven't received my alimony. That's what we're here to talk about." It was almost impressive their ability to ignore reality. "The letter was a certified legal document," I said plainly. "Delivered, received, ignored. That's not just Ruddite's evidence." Margaret rolled her eyes. Kevin blinked slowly, gears still turning. I kept my tone even. "I'm not paying you anything. On the contrary, I'll be filing for damages." Kevin finally registered it. "You're what?" "Emotional distress, defamation, harassment. I have the receipts, Kevin. Literally." Margaret turned red first. "This is ridiculous. We're the victims. Kevin only stepped out because you failed as a wife." "Really?" I looked at her directly. "When exactly did he start cheating? Give me a date. We'll go from there." Kevin opened his mouth, closed it again. Then finally, a year ago, when Sean started piano lessons with Emily. That's when it got serious. "Interesting," I said, "because the timeline on the other women goes back to when Sean was in preschool." "Shall I name them?" Margaret went quiet. Sean, who had been silent until now, pulled out a small folder and placed it on the table. "These are my notes," he said. "I started noticing things when I was around 5. Dad was always at parent nights, but never remembered anyone's name after. And he always came home in different clothes." Kevin glared at him. "You were a kid. You didn't know anything." Sean opened the folder. Photos, printouts, messages, receipts. Kevin's face drained of color. "Kids notice more than you think," Sean said quietly. "And they remember." I folded my hands. "So again, we're not here to discuss what I owe you. We're here to make clear what you owe me and what a court will confirm if we go that far." Kevin stared at the table. Margaret looked like she might scream, but no one said a word. "Not when the truth is that heavy." Sean sat quietly at first, hands resting on the folder in his lap, but I could see the shift in his posture with the way he leaned slightly forward, like someone preparing for checkmate. Kevin, as always, looked offended by reality. "This is all circumstantial. Conversations, hearsay. You don't have proof." Margaret jumped in with her usual flair for indignation. "Exactly. What, you think a few chit-chats and bedtime stories count as evidence? You probably bribed those women into saying things." I almost laughed. The irony of calling out bribery in a room full of people who've done far worse. Sean didn't flinch. He reached forward and quietly connected his phone to the TV. "You want definitive?" His voice was calm, firm. "This was recorded when I was about a year old. Back when Grandma used to pick me up from daycare without asking." Margaret paled. The screen lit up with grainy footage, baby Sean's playpen and frame, just like I remembered. The baby monitor had been motion-triggered and angled with precision. For safety, for peace of mind, not for this at the time. In the clip, Kevin walked in with a woman not his wife. She dropped her designer purse inside the playpen like it was a gym bag. Then the two of them sat on the couch, too close, too familiar. The kind of closeness that doesn't need subtitles. I reached for the remote and paused it before the scene could turn inappropriate. That's enough. Kevin sat frozen. Margaret opened her mouth, then shut it, her cheeks twitching as her hands gripped the sides of the chair. You said we were lying, Sean said, still calm. You said you needed evidence. That's one clip. We have more. Kevin looked visibly smaller now, like his arrogance had finally started cracking under weight it couldn't carry. I thought Sean didn't understand English, he muttered. He does now, I said. And he remembers more than you'd like. Margaret tried to recover, voice shrill. You recorded your own father? What kind of child is that? The kind who was raised in lies, Sean replied. The kind who watched his mom carry the house, the bills, the dignity while you both acted like parasites. It was quiet after that. Kevin's charm's favorite weapon lay in ruins. Margaret didn't even fake righteousness anymore. She just sat, stunned, the replay button hovering like a threat. I stood. I'm not here to beg or negotiate. I'm here to warn you. If you don't drop the harassment, we go public. Court, press. You think a scandal's bad for Kevin's career? Wait until the footage hits an inbox at his company. I looked Kevin dead in the eye. Sean was never the one who needed protection. I was. Sean stood beside me. We're done playing defense. And for once, they had nothing to say. Kevin looked like he'd been punched in the gut. His face had drained of color. Margaret, for once, had gone quiet, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line, mascara barely holding against the corners of her eyes. I almost felt bad. Almost. There's more, I said, calm and deliberate. Plenty more. Screenshots, recordings, eyewitness statements. You wanted a war. I just brought the evidence. Margaret tried to recover. This is harassment, emotional manipulation. You're dragging this family through the mud just because you couldn't keep a marriage together. No, I replied. You're confusing retaliation with accountability. I kept the marriage afloat while your son was off playing house with whoever had a spare evening. I cleaned up after the emotional wreckage he left behind us, and yours. Sean didn't speak, but he moved beside me with quiet assurance. He opened the folder in his hand and laid out the printed transcript dates, names, matching timestamps from Kevin's travel records. The proof wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It was systematic, surgical. Kevin's voice cracked. You can't use any of this in court. We'll let the judge decide that, I said, eyes level. Besides, if you really believed that, you wouldn't be sweating right now. Margaret blurted, we're the ones who've suffered. We should be asking for compensation. I turned to her, slowly. Then you'll need proof. Do you have a list of verbal abuse, financial neglect, recordings of me threatening you? Because we do few. Everything you've said while Sean was practicing piano in the living room. Everything you yelled when you thought no one was listening. She went silent. Her eyes darted toward her phone, like a drowning woman searching for a life vest. I wouldn't bother, I added. That neighbor friend of yours? The one you thought was on your side. She's known my family since I was a kid. She told me she only pretended to agree with you so you'd keep talking. Sean let out a low whistle. That's called a social checkmate, Grandma. I didn't gloat. There was nothing left to prove. Kevin had betrayed his vows. Margaret had poisoned the air in our home for years. And still, I hadn't burned the house down. I documented everything. Patient, strategic, prepared. So here's what's going to happen, I said, straightening the stack of papers. You will receive a formal claim for damages. If you want to contest it, we'll see you in court. Otherwise, stay out of my life and my house. Kevin stared at the floor. Margaret buried her face in her hands. This wasn't revenge. It was closure, and it was overdue. Kevin leaned back, smug, tossing out a grin that never reached his eyes. Funny, Sarah, you've been lecturing me about loyalty and fidelity. But didn't I see you getting into Ryan Clark's car last week? Our CEO himself. You and your high horse maybe not so pure after all. I didn't flinch. His voice was rising, hoping to bait me. Pathetic. You think you're better than me? He scoffed. If you to have something going on, fine. But if it's an affair, you just handed me the perfect weapon. One whiff of scandal and Clark's done. I take his seat. So honestly thinks. You just did me a favor. He laughed like he'd already won something. I let him have his moment. A fool with a plan is still a fool. Then came the voice from the hallway. "Mom, Mr. Clark's here." Kevin froze mid-laugh. Sean stepped aside, and there stood Ryan, perfect posture, pressed suit, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Harper," Ryan said smoothly, walking in like he owned the room. "I believe I just heard you say something about scandal and succession. Care to elaborate?" The silence could have cracked glass. Kevin's face dropped several shades as he sputtered for words. "You look, I didn't mean." "Because what I heard," Ryan continued, voice even, "sounded an awful lot like you were planning to weaponize a false accusation to climb the corporate ladder. That's ambitious." I almost felt bad watching Kevin melt under the weight of his own stupidity. "Almost." Ryan turned to me. "Sarah, I hope it's all right that I stopped by. Sean invited me. Said I might want to clarify some things, given the rumors." "Perfect timing," I said, letting my tone stay level. "Some folks in this house have trouble distinguishing facts from fiction." Kevin looked like he was trying to disappear into the carpet. "You've got it all wrong. I didn't mean anything." "Don't worry," Ryan replied. "I've already heard enough." Sean stood next to me, proud and steady. "I invited Mr. Clark because I knew you'd try to twist things. He's been mentoring me, not Mom. But even if you were helping her, it's not illegal to have integrity. Something this house has been running low on." Margaret, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly snapped. "You don't know what we've been through." "No," I said calmly. "You don't know what you've put us through. But we documented it. All of it. So please, keep shouting. The louder you get, the more foolish you sound." Ryan adjusted his cufflinks and smiled faintly. "Sarah, Senior'll see you both at the workshop next week. Keep moving forward." He nodded once at Kevin and walked out. And Kevin? He stayed planted there, staring at the door, realization setting in. The game had flipped, and for once, he was the one exposed. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. Kevin sat there, still flushed with the arrogance of a man who thought he'd just played a winning handline. About me riding in Ryan Clark's car, spinning wild accusations of an affair. "You talk a lot about my infidelity, Sarah," he said, voice slick with smugness. "But what about you and Ryan? You think I didn't see you get in his car that day? Pretty public move if you had something to hide." He truly thought he had me. For a moment, I let him enjoy it. Let him bask in his fantasy that he had the upper hand. Then Sean walked in. "Mom, Mr. Clark is here." Kevin's smirk cracked. Ryan Clark's EO, polished and priest, stepped through the door, calm, measured, deadly. "Good evening, Mr. Harper. I heard something about a scandal and a change in leadership. Care to elaborate?" Ryan's smile was polite, but his eyes, not remotely. Kevin's bravado bled out of him like air from a punctured tire. He tried to scramble, spinning some nonsense about meritocracy, about how he had the drive, the numbers, the vision. "You only became CEO because of your dad's health," he said, defiant. "That position should have gone to someone with real talent. Maybe someone like me." I almost felt embarrassed for him. Ryan didn't blink. "You're right. It's a results-based business. You're our top salesperson, but our lowest in client retention. The numbers speak for themselves. Contracts don't mean much if customers don't stay." He let that sink in, then continued. "And while I've avoided demoralizing the team with your internal metrics, I had already scheduled a review with you. We value continuity, Mr. Harper, not just charm. This isn't a one-night stand industry." It hit harder than I expected. Kevin looked like a man who'd been slapped, but no one had raised a hand. Ryan's tone never shifted from professional. That's what made it brutal. Then, calmly, "We also have some concerns about your use of internal messaging tools for personal relationships. There have been complaints about inappropriate conduct with clients and even internal staff." I could see Margaret's face sink into itself. She'd been clinging to the illusion that her son was still someone to defend. Now she just looked like someone who realized the pedestal was made of paper. Kevin was silent, staring into the floor, jaw clenched. He'd tried to paint me as morally compromised, wanted to drag me down with him. Instead, he just highlighted the difference between desperation and dignity. Ryan nodded toward me. "Ms. Harper, I'd still like to continue our earlier conversation about community initiatives, but only when it's convenient. I returned his nod. Thank you. Let's arrange something next week. As we left, I didn't look back. Kevin would be stuck there, caged in his own undoing. This time, no one needed to raise their voice. The truth was loud enough. Kevin had shrunk into the couch like a man who'd finally realized the flames were real. His bluster about Ryan Clark and supposed scandal had fizzled the moment. Ryan stepped into the room and called his bluff with a calm that felt surgical. I didn't have to defend myself. Kevin had already done the damage in himself. Margaret looked hollow. Her voice, always too loud, too certain, had gone silent. She clutched a tissue like it could hold her pride together. That ship had sunk. As Ryan politely excused himself, "We'll talk further at the office, Sean," and I followed behind. But before we reached the door, Sean stepped forward. "Thanks, Dad," he said. His tone was light, but there was weight behind it. "For all the lessons. I can swim over 100 yards now. I'm getting better in my AP English discussions too. You gave me all that." Kevin blinked, not sure whether it was sarcasm. Sean didn't wait. "I'm switching piano teachers, but I'm going to keep playing. And I hope you and Ms. Ross find what you're looking for." A pause. "Bye." Sean passed me with quiet resolve. For all Kevin's speeches about manhood and leadership, our son had become both without him even noticing. Kevin didn't answer. He just stared ahead, eyes glassy, hands folded uselessly in his lap. A moment later, he began to cry, not with dignity. Loud, guttural sobs like someone who'd never believed consequences would actually knock. I didn't stay to comfort him. That part of me had died a long time ago somewhere between the first lie and the last accusation. I stepped outside without turning back. Days later, Sean and I met Ryan for dinner to thank him. It felt strange at first sitting across from the man who had, in one afternoon, dismantled Kevin's delusions with surgical precision. I raised my glass. "If it weren't for you, I don't know where we'd be." Ryan chuckled. "Please, cut the CEO stuff. No titles, no formalities." Sean grinned. "It's wild you and Mom were in the same high school. Small world." It was. I remembered Ryan back then, quiet, sharp-eyed, always a step ahead of everyone else without needing to announce it. We weren't close, but we had shared a desk once, and he used to help me with algebra. "You haven't changed," he said. Still sharp, still calm in chaos. I almost laughed. If only he knew. He'd helped with everything from securing the rental to connecting me with the lawyer, even guiding us on what to document and how. And it was Sean who'd reached out to him first, believing I needed a solid ally, someone with weight. He wasn't wrong. As we sipped wine, I felt something unfamiliar creep in. Peace. Not vindication, not revenge, just clarity. The kind you earn not from escaping the storm, but walking out of it with your head high and your hands clean. "Thanks again. Eat as much as you want a day, it's on me," Ryan had said with that same easy smile. Of course, he paid. CEO or not, he always moved like someone who didn't need to prove anything, but still made his presence known. After dinner, he drove Sean and me back to the Hilltop house. We waved until his taillights disappeared down the slope. Something about that ride home felt like closing a chapter. Kevin had resigned. Official story, personal reasons. Real story, HR investigations confirmed inappropriate expense reports, abuse of power, multiple policy violations. Turns out the business trip with his mother and Emily Ross was logged as company travel. Audacious, even for him. Naturally, I had him move out. The alimony, ironically, for his own infidelity was handled through my attorney. Emily and the other women he'd conned were tracked down as well. I didn't go after the ones who genuinely didn't know he was married. One of them looked so heartbroken when she found out. I actually felt sorry for her. I warned her, gently, not to fall for another smooth-talking man with nothing behind the eyes. What stuck with Kevin, apparently, were Sean's words. Whatever pride he had left was dented by the boy he barely raised. Still, he's been paying child support on time. Maybe shame finally caught up to him. Or maybe Sean's tone had landed deeper than expected. Margaret is now wrapped up in a legal battle of her own. I'm not directly involved anymore. Our communication goes through attorneys. She's no longer mother-in-law, just a former co-conspirator clinging to a persona that doesn't work outside her carefully staged living room. The debt on the house is cleared. My uncle helped refinance it after Kevin left. It's mine again, it just legally, but in every sense that matters. Kevin married me thinking I'd be his shortcut to real estate. He saw property value. I lived in it like a home. According to my lawyer, Kevin told investigators he never planned to give up his affairs even after getting married. More women, more fun, he said, like a teenager bragging at a frat house. He even believed marriage made seduction easier, more credibility, fewer questions. That alone tells you everything you need to know. Sean once asked, "Are you going to get remarried, Mom?" I paused. I'm 42. It's not too late, but it's not something I chase. Maybe, if the right person shows up, but I'm happy just being with you, I said. He dodged the hug. Teenagers. He's already taller than me. The best parts of Kevin, without the rot. That's my hope. Tonight, we're celebrating Sean's 17th birthday. At his request, Ryan came to the house. He brought a brand new tablet of the line. The two of them sat in the living room, talking like old friends or new family. From the kitchen, I heard Sean ask, "So what do you think of my mom?" There was a pause. Then Ryan, in a quiet, even voice, said, "Your mom lost her parents in high school, but she smiled every day at school, so no one had to feel sorry for her. She worked every night, kept her grades up, and still found time to help others. I remember seeing her cry alone sometimes. She never gave up. I admired her then. I admire her now." I stood there, drink in hand, heart full. Some stories don't need revenge, just truth and time.